So each of these kinds of despair is, well, like I say, a breakdown in that relationship, and each are slightly different, right? The first I've already described in terms of zombie films, right? And quite frankly, right, a lot of people just put on this persona that they don't even relate to, right, as they just go through their lives. When actors put on a role, right, what they do is they don't relate to themselves, but they relate to this role that's not even themselves. And quite frankly, right, even that is one step better than this first kind of despair here, right? Now, what Roderick points out, right, in that video that I showed you, one of the ways to, in a sense, overcome despair is not overcoming despair at all, right? He points out that opium, or religion, is the opium for the masses, quoting Marx, right? Now, what he points out further than that is, in our culture, right, opium is the opium of the masses. And what's more, opium, right, isn't even quite a good enough drug for us anymore. We have designer drugs, right, that kind of help ourselves to avoid relating to ourselves in our various relations, right? One of the ways to, in a sense, avoid the problem of despair, this is why Kierkegaard calls this first kind of despair not despair in a strict sense, is by numbing ourselves, right? In a sense, what we do is we kill our spirits. We drug ourselves to the point where we don't even think of ourselves as having selves, right? We don't, as spirit, relate to ourselves in the relation, right? We can pop a Valium or any one of these mood stabilizer kind of drugs that just numb our contact with ourselves, right? Numb our ability to care about ourselves acting in our lives, right? We just become zoned out, right? People do this with alcohol constantly. People do this with the under-the-table just say no kind of drugs constantly. And like I say, there are these prescription drugs that help us, in a sense, avoid the issues that come along with despair, right? So the first kind of despair isn't even despair in a strict sense, right? The second kind of despair, not to will to be oneself, right, is, well, it's a form of self-hatred, right? Now, what Kierkegaard is trying to claim here is that, well, we are a relationship that relates itself to itself in this relationship, and we're one that relates ourselves in a manner that cares, right? When every time we open our mouths, we think we're stupid, we think we're not good enough, we think we're not funny enough, we think we don't like the self that we've got, we wish we weren't ourselves, right? This is a breakdown in that relationship, and the result is what Kierkegaard calls despair. The third kind, like I say, is the most interesting. To will to be oneself, right? Kierkegaard uses to illustrate this someone who holds Caesar or death, right? This is somebody who wants to be Julius Caesar, right? Or would rather be dead, right? Now there are lots of sort of more common examples of this all the time, right? When we find ourselves emulating the behaviors of other people, we wish we were ourselves, but not really ourselves, but this better version of ourselves, right? I like me, but I wish I were smarter, funnier, wittier, more comfortable in social situations, taller, shorter, more muscular, better looking, what have you, right? So in willing to be ourselves, in relating to ourselves as in the relation, right, what we're saying is that we would like to be ourselves, but we would like to be this different version of ourselves, right? But that doesn't alleviate ourselves from despair, because it's basically to say that I don't want to be me. I don't want to be me. I want to be this other self, right? Now, what Kierkegaard is claiming is that these kinds of despair are very normal, human kinds of despair. And in every situation that we find ourselves in, they're just lurking there in the background, right? There have been moments, even when recording this particular 10-minute segment, that I've said, no, Grant, you're being stupid, right? You're not explaining this well. What are you doing? I'm not satisfied with the way that I'm explaining this material, right? At which point I project a better, smarter, wittier, more affluent philosopher version of myself to say that I wish I was, right? In order to overcome the awkwardness in explaining this material, right? Whenever we look ourselves in the mirror in the morning and say to ourselves that, well, God, I hate my life, I hate my hair, I wish this were different, etc., right? That's despair, right? So the trick to be human, right? The trick that defines being human, right? As a human being that is spirit, that the spirit that is the self, and a self that relates itself to itself in the relation in a way that cares, right? The trick, claims Kierkegaard, is being able to take ourselves seriously, right? Now, I've used myself as an example here, right? I've said that these courses are, basically I can present them by route, right? That's one of the benefits of the video versions of these classes, is that I can kind of say it once, I can say it the way I usually say the things that I say about this material, and then it just kind of exists there as a document that can be used again and again, right? That's kind of handy, right? Because then I don't have to play act, right? I don't have to go through the motions hundreds and hundreds of times when I do these online courses, right? The on-campus courses, I still have to be as witty and funny and take myself seriously in these kinds of situations while I'm presenting this material, right? This is difficult because, like I say, we are play acting, right? So, for Kierkegaard, it's a trick taking ourselves seriously as we're relating to ourselves in the relation, right? Because, for the most part, in that relation, right, we play act, right? Think about the 3 or 4 jokes that you tell, and you tell all the time. Think about the 5 stories that, when you're on a first date, you tell to explain yourself to the person that you are trying to explain yourself to. What you're doing is you're sketching out essentially a fiction about yourself, a persona, right? And this way that you relate yourself to yourself and relate yourself as yourself to others, right, is something that has to be meaningful, right? But I don't know, if you're anything like me, and I think everybody is something like me, right, which is a strange thing to say in and of itself, right? I think we're all in essentially the same situation, right? As we're explaining ourselves to ourselves and to other people, right, we quite frequently catch ourselves and say, bullshit, right? We catch ourselves lying to ourselves, right? So, despair is very human, right? And it's always lurking there in potential. And Kierkegaard wants to claim that it's a good thing that it's lacking there, or lurking there in potential. Why? Because, well, if it weren't, we couldn't even care, right? To be human is, right off the bat, a good thing, because we are a being that relates ourselves to ourselves in a way that cares.